I move that Martha Ledford's request to attend today's meeting of the JMRL Technology Committee remotely due to personal matter, specifically travel time, be approved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Welcome, Mark. Okay, well, thank you, Peter, for getting us organized and getting us here today. I think it's good to stick on our quarterly schedule that we've had. I'm sorry for not printing an agenda for the technology committee meeting, but I thought we were going to post the paper. At any rate, Sarah Elizabeth is not really here today. She has to be unexpectedly away, but she's listening, so I'll be able to get in touch with her if need be, but mostly she's an inactive participant. But otherwise, we've got the full committee. I did want to start with some news that I think most everybody here, except for Martha, is aware of, which is that Kayla Payne is leaving JMRL. She is moving on to become the IT operations manager at the city of Charlottesville. So we're very happy for Kayla, very sad for JMRL. But certainly that transition will impact some of the things that we're talking about over the next, hopefully, few months. We shall see. But having said that, Peter, if you'd like to jump into our agenda, I do have an electronic copy of it.
Yeah, so Monticello Avenue planning.
Okay, I just wanted to update the technology committee on this. It has been, Fred came to the full board in May or June and gave a continuing ad about the history of services from the Monticello Avenue Computer Lab and the Virtual Village. And then the policy committee has been discussing policy number, whichever it is, for Monticello Avenue, which largely focuses on the virtual village. And the policy committee meeting last month, we left it with staff are going to come back in August with a transition plan for how to communicate changes in this service to the member organizations and how to work with them to meet their needs as they transition away from having a server available at the library. So Brad and Kayla and Sarah and myself have been working on that. We're in the process of reaching out to users right now. That's about all we have to report at this point, but I know we mentioned the technology committee during the policy committee discussion, so I wanted to make sure everybody was up to date.
In my you're stirring my memory now. My recollection of the discussion was the policy committee. I mean, ultimately this goes to the full board anyways, but the policy committee is going to make a recommendation of what this policy is going to say. And I think the tenor of the discussion was that we're likely to deprecate the virtual village. But I think that wasn't a done deal yet. We wanted to consider what the transition plan would look like before making that decision or recommendation. Does that match your?
That sounds about
right.
It's about what I remember from that sounded. So, I think that we'll get into this with the policy committee and the full board. I think that there was some discussion about having some set of documentation for users saying, here's a transition plan for you all. But the more we look at the needs of our individual groups, the more it's become apparent there might be 25 of those. Each organization might have very different needs. I've spoken to a few folks already who were saying, yeah, we've been looking at some other hosting. We've got funding for it. We've got our own in-house, volunteers ready to work on that. It's like we're probably fine. And we've talked to some folks who are just going to need a lot of support in order to find another solution.
But do you think by the time of the next policy committee, which is a month from now, basically, we'll have some kind of substantial information base to, responses to what we did? Do you think how will you be substantially complete? Do you think by a month from now in being able to share that deliverable to the policy committee?
Well, it depends on what you mean by complete. I mean, are we going to have a plan for each organization? No, I don't think so. Well,
but by substantially complete, I mean, is the policy committee are you going to be in a place where you can give the policy committee a good feel for what it's going to involve?
Of course. Yeah. It depends too on the response we get to community. Yeah. Some of the information about who to contact at organizations is a little out of date, so we're trying to string through those to figure out who's the person here who would actually have that decision-making capability. And
right.
The response time for that might not be, they might not immediately have an answer. It's being given something new at this point. So I think we will have a good sense of what the needs are moving forward.
Yeah, okay.
And if not, then, you know, the
We can-
major time crunches we have are the scheduling for the policy committee itself, and that we can be flexible with if we
Right.
need to. And then the fact that the server that we're currently using is end of life.
Right.
But it has. So.
Right, so that's a time pressure, the server issue, but it's not, there's not a, because at one point I had the impression there was sort of a budget decision we needed to decide by a certain date. Are we going to purchase a new server and go ahead or not? So is there a time deadline associated with that, or more of a time pressure just because we don't want it to fall apart?
I would describe it as a pressure.
Yeah, okay.
At this point.
It's not a hard,
Right.
because
How out of date is it? How end of life is it?
It was into support from Microsoft, or at least we got an email about it no longer being under warranty in 2023.
So
But so I think we bought it in
So-
2018.
deadline was 2 years ago.
Yeah, but
And their equipment cycle for this fiscal year is already like passed.
Yeah. So we did, to your, I think answering your question, the full board did approve funding for a replacement.
Right. So it's either you're going to actually spend it or not. Okay, I got you. Okay.
That's the decision.
Thank
Any other questions about that? Okay, we just wanted to make sure the technology committee was involved.
David, do you have an understanding of the 25 users, how many have been contacted at this point?
A handful at this point. Martha, we've been collecting some information and we're sending out the massive communication next week. So we're gonna give a 2-week deadline for initial responses, expecting then that there's gonna have to be some follow-up phone calls after that. So I'm hoping that by the time the board policy committee meets in August, we'll have a pretty clear picture of the needs of each org, but I'm not 100% on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. That's good, I think. Okay. Peter, shall we move on?
Yeah, so the next agenda item, website enhancements, timeline planning, or what I have been calling sort of a roadmap for the website. And my thinking is that, you know, the idea of just an overall website redesign is sort of archaic at this point. Like, you know, when the web launched and everyone just created, you know, sort of brochure websites, and like every 12 months they redo it. And but at this point with the library's website, it's basically an ecology of, you know, different applications and software and content, and there's ways to look at it in terms of what are the parts of the website, you know, whether that's applications or content repositories or what have you. We can look at it as layers, right? Like sort of branding and code and content and so forth, hardware. And so my hope was that we could, at least in this meeting, just start to kind of identify what are those parts, what are the layers. I think that really needs to come from staff perspective, folks that know how that website runs and what keeps it together. And I know from earlier conversations, there are like the catalog, for instance, right? There's a sort of a timeline there in terms of when you need to renew a contract or change the vendor, or and in some cases the parts may be tied together now that could be pulled apart, or the opposite, right? So like with the case of the catalog, right? I think David, you'd said that some catalog vendors now throw in a website along with the catalog, and so you're kind of getting some kind of cookie cutter website that can be adapted. So, you know, we could also look at that, right? What are the parts now, but are there opportunities to consolidate or reasons to split apart components, right? The calendar is another big chunk that would be good to talk about. What's the timeline for that?
Yeah, and I think that, and that one thing that the library has learned in the redesign process in the last few years is that, you know, in the library's mind, shouldn't say that, the library staff's mind, there's always been like, oh, here's the catalog and here's the website. But the public, the users they're not interested in that distinction.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm interested in moving forward, and anything that can, any decisions that are made to kind of make sure that they're presented uniformly, you know, that they work together. So you mentioned, one thing I will mention.
And just one other thing that pops to my mind, as we think about it is, there are some things that the website absolutely should do, but you should be aware that like people don't necessarily rely on that. So the thing that's in my mind is, right, so in my experience with like Ann Arbor District Library, there were three major uses of the website. One was the catalog. The other was the calendar of events. And the third was like looking up, you know, what hours is my branch open, for instance, or what's the phone number. And that third one these days, like personally as a user, like Google does that for me, right? And it's got to be fed the right information, but you know, so there are some things that we may have used to think were really important on a site that aren't as important anymore. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have that. I'm just saying that a lot of folks may not be looking on the website for that information as much anymore.
I think that's the feedback that JMRL got in this last redesign was, we were talking about the 3 C's the other day, it's like catalog, calendar, contact. That's what people were most interested in, those things, like they wanted to be able to find what services were being offered.
And I just wanted to add, like, in the last couple months since we've met, we have worked with a consultant on fixing those permalink issue.
Okay.
The calendar is
Cool.
now, we've had fixes for the multiple audience indicators. That's working better, where you can pick adult and it'll show adult, teen, children, like if it's for all ages. The time formatting is standardized, the URL formatting is standardized. The permalink label now says event link, because who knows what permalink. And the action, like when you click on it, it goes to that event. So we've made sure. And then also we've added calendar page navigation to the bottom, and it's fixed some of the responsiveness issues that we were having on the mobile view. So many thanks to Sarah, Elizabeth, and then Catherine Purdue, who we worked with to get some of that.
The one thing I noticed on as a partner with the book club, was someone registered for the event, and I got a notification with their email, which was really nice because now I'm in the habit of emailing folks ahead of the meeting to just sort of remind them that we're meeting and see if anyone has any questions. And so that was super useful. So that was
I think that was one of the reasons we went with that particular, Sarah and I weren't selecting Trump as a calendaring platform, but it lets you have organizers.
Yeah, I did want to say that of all the kind of facets that we're talking about here, the two that operate under contract that JMRL is using are our ILS, our integrated library system. So it's not just the web catalog, it's also our patron database, and it's also our cataloging database. So it runs all aspects of library usage, you know, with a whole and whatnot. So it has a catalog that is our classic catalog. It's the out of the box catalog from that system. So we're under contract for that overall system. Making a change to that overall system is more dramatic than just changing something on our online catalog. So that is under contract, and we're working on a 1-year renewal now, but it has been on our list for many years. So the other one is the calendaring itself, which is Kayla mentioned the vendor is called Trumba. And what was the timeline on that?
It's one of those where every year we can decide yay or nay. We have three more renewals allotted on this contract. So I think until 2030 is when we, like February 2030, February 2030 is what, so it renews each February.
And just to say a little bit about what that process looks like, and it might have changed some, and Caleb, jump in here if I'm wrong, but for both of those products, they were above a threshold that required the library to go through a cooperative procurement process. The city of Charles is our fiscal agent, and just spend the people's money. Basically, we go through a process in which you put out a request for a proposal, which is a lot of it's template boilerplate, but here's the thing that we want answered, and then you accept proposals in, and then you have a working group or a committee that looks at it, ranks them, and then figures out which one we're gonna negotiate with, and then work with the city to negotiate with the vendor. So, depending, I don't remember what the price points are now for that,
It's like less than 3,000 a year.
is we,
Oh, the threshold for
for when we have to do,
20,000.
yeah, and they look at the life of the contract, not the 1
Yeah,
year.
so yes, 20,000 is what the threshold is now to get a request from the quotes, which is more like, give me a quote for your account. And it's a little more informal than that request for proposal threshold is now $200,000. So that would be more of like a really big,
Like the
ILF, which that's about. what it
Calendars
was.
is probably request for quote, but you do wanna be careful, you don't want to just go out and get in a scenario where you're locked in with taking the lowest bid there, so you wanna make sure that write very carefully, like, these are the exact things that we need, because otherwise you can get stuck. So just to put out there, that's part of the, it's not as simple as saying to cancel Netflix and sign up for whatever that there is, but it is something that the library does and on a regular basis.
And is it true that like with the renewals, you're able to renew like at the same price?
No.
It did,
Almost
yeah.
never at the same price.
It-
It depends on
there's-
the contract.
Yeah.
That we end up signing.
There's usually like a 5% uplift each year if, or the city has said it can't go over the consumer price index for what the
Okay.
normal inflation rate might be.
So the advantage of,
The-
the real advantage of the renewals then is, I mean, it may be less of an increase than if you redid the contract, but it's mostly that you just don't have to go through the. whole
Right,
we're
we
good.
have to
every-
start fresh.
Right. And then, once you get to the end of the contract, do you have to go through that kind of RFP
Yeah,
or RFQ process again?
once the contract is written in such a way to allow, so when you get to the end like that, then we going through. the process again. Even if you know it's a solution, even if the library's happy with the current solution, for what, this is not just tech stuff, this is
Right.
other things as well. Even if it's like, okay, we have this thing and we like it, the contract is, we still have to give a good faith effort
Right.
to the rest of the world to compete for whatever. it
So
is
you
they're
can't
doing.
necessarily stick with it just because everyone knows
Yeah.
how to use it and stuff. Wow.
So, and that's just some like inside baseball for
Yeah.
what needs to happen for those things.
But what I also I've just heard is there's a natural required reevaluation point in 2030 for this particular component. And one of my interests is that we do that periodically and regularly. It doesn't have to be every year or even every 5 years, but in this case, there's the 3-year horizon. I'm comfortable that, it's probably time to just go through that. And again, you might do the process and come up with the same answer, but at least you've thought through and evaluated.
I think a little bit would depend on our staff transitions to a new person in charge of this department, but I would be interested in beginning that before the 3-year process is up, because I think our needs have changed, and again, like you said, that this might still be the best tool that's out there.
Yeah, but you don't know unless you.
Thing about skip a point about the catalog itself is that the main catalog that we're pointing to, that our website points to, is actually open source. Find it, it's based on Viewfind, which I think was Villanova University and VU. They built this overlay, so they're just taking the data that we're making available and making it into this nicer open source software, which is, open source takes as much time for the people working on it as buying a out of the box product does. So, changing, if we're talking about the catalog as one of these entities, Peter, then there's really 2 catalogs right now. There's the one that's like the feeding the information out there out of the box from our vendor, and then there's the overlay, which is the one that we spend the most time. But there are different functionalities in the 2 as well, which is like a dirty secret. But in the classic catalog, you can do things that the overlay isn't capable of.
And-
Respective time will.
And is it correct that a lot of the overlay work was just adapting the outputs or the data from the underlying layer to the current website's look and feel? I think that was a major.
Yeah, that has
aspect
been,
of it.
a time-consuming task for Sarah, because we had something that was working in the non-Drupal environment and then having to make it all work in the Drupal environment and then going. Still,
Yeah.
there's still all want to work on that too, like we still move that server.
Yeah, we've entered into a 5-year contract with Pantheon as our web host for our Drupal and other sites like our the hours, function hours app, the media review system, our blog, those are all hosted on Pantheon, and that is where we're trying to get Viewfind from Liquid Web over to. And we're working with Catherine Purdue on that as well.
Yeah.
But yes, there are other functionalities that it's capable of. It is just, getting that set up and upgrading it to the most recent version. There are more things that it can.
Like, I know I get requests every once in a while about these holds. Do you think that's a Viewfind?
I believe it is. I believe that one is functionality, and Sarah found the other day there was code for, we couldn't create your account, so Viewfind it may even have an online card creation component, that was one component that the functionality, the software stopped working because of the Big Maps API that's no longer working, so we're working on other solutions for an online card component.
So one thing that staff talks about a lot is whether or not that, so I mentioned that Aries, the classic catalog market, was an out-of-the-box solution from our vendor for the iOS. They have much better solutions that are for cost. They have the discovery layer, which is, it works natively with them. They host all of the data, right? So they're the company that works on it. We like it, but it's expensive, it's.
But that might get away from the stability issues that
Well,
you had.
we would effectively outsource.
Right, and I was about to say, and there's a staff cost, it sounds like that we've spent to create the initial adaptation, but it sounds like there's some ongoing staff cost as well, so. Right, yeah.
There's somebody that still have to manage it, and then I would follow.
Yeah, it would require less staff time. Yeah, you would, yeah, I understand, yes, agreed.
And I don't know, last what we saw, maybe this hour.
It's at least 35,000 more a year with the $15,000 year one implementation.
Yeah, and that probably has a 5%.
That's kind of what we've been in communications with our sales rep on, about if we wanted to add on Vega Discover, and now that includes, like, they're bundling that with a Vega, with an app as well. With this, they're just including that as a thing.
And it gives some functionality. It just, we basically have a 1-person team, Sarah, with some support from Caleb for doing this type of work, and I think it adds better connectivity with Libby, right? It tells people if you log in, you're going to one place, it will tell you all of your library resources. And it also, they'll sell you a calendar solution as well. I don't know, but they'll also sell you a website.
Yeah.
So there's an option here that you've identified, and there's cost benefits.
Yeah.
What is I'm just still going back to this idea of a regular, in some sense, evaluation. So is there a trigger point or a time point or a calendar point that you would say, okay, we're going to sit down today and decide, we're going to look over whether Vega Lite versus Find It is the way to go for just, for the next time period? Or is it just, it sounds kind of ad hoc to me.
It has largely been budget driven. Can we find room for an additional $35,000 in the operational budget?
But that presupposes that it's even better, a better choice. And I don't know if you've decided that or not, or if the current decision has already been cost-based.
We have not gone through a.
Yeah. So I'm just, my perspective is I'm interested in defining somewhere, what that, just like in the policy committee, where you look at every policy every 10 years. Okay, so we're going to look at the Vega Lite versus Find It layer with some frequency, and it might be simple. It might be, hey, are you feeling it? No, I'm not. But you kind of said there, it was on your calendar. Yeah, exactly. But I know it would be more detailed than that. But there's some not a metric, but there's a checkpoint of when you're going to sit down and do that. It's going to be on your calendar somewhere.
It's asking me to do for this year,
Yeah.
to identify
Right.
each one of these elements.
Yeah.
And then come up with a systematically, how are we gonna review?
I think, yeah, yes. I think the board directive or discussion was just more at a high level. I do think Peter's observation that it really decomposes into various components, which could be evaluated separately. I think that makes
Yeah, and I
sense.
think we're prepared to
So-
talk about some of those today.
Yeah.
We all-
Yeah. I think a next step would just be, and I think that's what Peter was going, is just get a piece of paper where we list out what all the components are, and then you can start to drill down.
Yeah, so.
Well, I have one other,
Good thing.
well, let me add one thing before you do that. You talked about the 3 Cs as the primary functions of the website. I would observe, it appears to me, if you look at our website right now, there's an awful lot of energy or effort put into what I would call discovery. We're trying to, when people visit, we really want you to know we've got these digital catalogs. We really want you to know there's this carousel with here's what's going on at the library. And there's, to me, just in terms of where the landscape of how things are being used on that page, that seems to be a very important goal from the library perspective of what they're trying to accomplish with the website, what it looks like to me. So I think there's a conversation around how important is that? Is that, equal level as the 3 Cs and just trying to prioritize that as well. And then there's a separate question is, if discovery is important, what's the most effective way to effect the discovery? To my perspective, is you've heard it before, the more stuff that's going on, the less effective it is, because your attention just gets diverted out. But I would put that on a list somewhere. Is this concept? Yes. It doesn't have to be an identified key goal of the website, but I'm just observing that it seems to be something that.
I mean, to me,
Very
that
true.
kind of could come up under the. Right, so. You can talk about parts of the website. You could also talk about lenses through which you look at the website. And for me, like 2 different ones would be branding, which is like, right, kind of look and feel, and what's the impression I get, and the logo and the colors and that sort of thing. That's one. The one that you're talking about, to me, fits a little bit more into information architecture, which is, sort of, how are we structuring information on the website, and to what degree are we doing push versus pull, right? And for me, that language is, the pull is like this is what the user comes for. They're focused. They're like,
Right.
I just want to find this. The push is a little bit of like, while you're here, did you know we do this? And we're trying to make, did you know we're doing this? Did you know you can find this? And getting that balance right. And so that's another, to me, that would be another element of the roadmap, would be, again, just on that sort of timing thing, how often do we take a look at the information architecture or the branding? And is that, do we do a check-in once a year, or is it more of every 10 years? There's kind of a serious effort at kind of questioning, do we want to change this? And I have no real opinion on the timing, but I kind of agree, it would be nice to actually have some, like to sort of have to sort of understand, we're gonna take a look from this perspective, in a couple of years, or, right, and all of this kind of, I guess it's worth just acknowledging, like, I know that there's tweaking going on, right? There's refinements going on as problems arise, but at a certain point, like, we're all now at a point where we're too familiar with it to see it as somebody new would see it, and so there is value in evaluations at certain points.
Yeah, I think probably, I think the one difference between the staff's perspective and the board's perspective there is that we do get the benefits of both our hearing people's successes and failures that you don't necessarily.
Right.
And yes, when we first went live with it 2 summers ago, then it was like a lot, like this, this button used to be here, that used to be there, how do I do this, how do I do that, I love this, I hate this, there was a lot of that. I think that has that has streamlined and also as Sarah has tweaked and made things more using her background.
But also as the user base to them, to the existing user base, it's no longer new
Right.
also.
And we get new users to
Right.
solve,
Yeah.
you know, then you start to hear, instead of comparing to our old system, maybe you're compared to.
Ann Arbor,
Ann
yeah,
Arbor,
right.
and in Ann Arbor, you could do this, here you can't. So.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm interested in that as well, I think, we'll have to think about like what we're actually asking for there, and you know, like who's gonna do what. It's a little bit easier when you talk about when we evaluate the contracts of the calendaring service.
Yeah.
It's very pretty cut and dry, and there's a process, there are things we have to do.
Yeah.
You know, when you're talking about these. I always think about it as form versus function, that's not exactly what you're saying, but you know, Mike, for years, we talked about that sliding scale, and trying to find the happy medium between those two things.
Yeah.
I'm talking about how to best go about that, there are different opinions on what the most effective way to evaluate it. So I think we need to drill down on that a little bit more and say, what are we actually, what are we gonna do?
Well, if I can take that to one step, I like the concept of lenses. So we have functional components that are supposed to do, you know, things that need to be done. They're addressing the need for that the user wants to engage with the catalog, that they want to engage with calendar and so forth. And Peter, maybe you can help me with terminology here. So there's a functional thing, can the user do what they want to do, but there's also our goals with the website. So one presentation or discovery is sort of a goal that we have that we may have that we're pushing on. So I'm calling that functional is not, it's purpose driven, or in a company, we might be saying business goals. What are our business goals that we're trying to accomplish with, and sort of identify what those are. What are the things we're trying to accomplish with the website? And I think branding and impressions is one of those high level goals that I've talked about a little bit. But discovery is would be a totally valid business goal. It's just a matter of what's the most effective way to accomplish that in balance with whatever the other business goals might be, because in the end, there's only so many pixels on the front page.
I know it's
Well, so I'm envisioning maybe it's sort of a two multi-lensed document, which is at some high level, what are the goals of this thing, and have those listed out. And then elsewhere, there's components functionally that are each of them serve the goals in some way. And again, I'd love help with the terminology on that.
This does lead me to think about, all of us have been involved in libraries for a while at least, and you know, what's the thing that we hear from public libraries everywhere? It's like, oh, I always meet people and I tell them about what is happening in the library, and they say, oh, I had no idea.
Right,
So
no.
our goal is forever, so
Yeah.
the webpage is one place where we can be like, here it is.
You can try,
all the
yeah.
stuff we can do, you know, and in fact, the services doc that's on there, that was a long time, you know, we want to be able to get it all out there, so there is, you know, and there's an art and a science, I'm sure, to this, and we're still talking about trying to figure out like where is that perfect blend. Make sure we can get that information available.
It's an important goal, absolutely. We're pointing it out that it's an important goal. But yes, how do we accomplish that? Right.
Point people to, so if I go on the news to talk about any given service or program or something like that, I'm always going to end with for more information.
But I would say that's a landing, so that doesn't have to be a discovery. Discovery is what Peter has called push. You've just created a pull. Okay, if you're interested in the free book club or whatever it is, go to our website on this ideally a sublink, and now they've been pulled. They're pulling themselves over there to look at it because they're interested. So there's definitely, I think that is definitely another goal that I would identify, is a repository where we can point people to everything about the library. It's just a matter of how is that organized and presented if you're not coming. Well, in two cases: A, if you're coming to look for that, how do you find it? And B, if you weren't coming to look for it, how do we, you know, expose you to some of those things?
I think when staff were talking about this a little bit, we were talking about stepping down to the more practical, not more practical, but the less high level discussion about like what are those elements there. There's some internal documentation which is available to board members as well on the internet that already identifies like the elements basically of the web page, which is a good place to start. So we can kind of look at some of those just to get, so what I'm not expecting today that we're gonna sit down and write, and here's the date for this, but this is kind of the framework that I'll bring back to this group, and then we'll bring to the full board to say, like, here's the plan for review
Yeah.
over time. I think we're gonna have this pretty good term there. And there were a few things we talked about that they might not be on here and
So what are some elements beyond the ones we talked about?
okay, so
And by the way, just like from a terminology perspective, um, the what you're calling discovery, I generally kind of think of as marketing and communication, right? Like on a business side, it's like, what do we want to,
Right.
how do we want to shape people's perception? What do we want to make sure they see? And that, you know, I kind of also then label push, which, you know, is very often there's too much push. Like usually I'm kind of advocating to shift the balance towards the user.
and to that point, you know, one of the things that Peter and I talked about briefly the other day was, you know, stability. You know, making sure that we're in an environment where if people go to JMRL.org, they can get content is still the top.
You're right.
And that has taken many years to get to the place that we're at right now, thanks to the work of Kayla and Sarah, basically. So we're in a really good place right now, but as you've heard, we're not all the way here. So we just migrated the server this spring, and support, and we're looking to move all of these. That might be one of the last. For a while, let's see. You know, the background architecture, that stuff is maybe an element, maybe not, I don't know, like that certainly is a top concern to my staff when they're talking about things that need to be reviewed periodically. And some of that is needs-based too. You know, we found with the previous environment that we were in that the needs weren't being met, and there were times when people were going to the website and couldn't access the website because of some structural problems. So we made a change rather than wait for 5 years and evaluate it, it was a necessity. Same for some of those things. So we described areas in the classic catalog. That's kind of one element that's out there. That's the out of the box. It's called Aries because that was the name of the server that it was on. It's sort of Aries.jmrl.org to direct access to that virtual server now. You find it, of course, is the overlay that goes on top of that. It's the open source overlay there. There is an hours app that is running on the websites. That is just a way for you know that would be kind of in the C contacts maybe category. You know, what hours does branch have? This is branch closed today. There's the meeting room booking system software. This is also an open source software that we are hosting on the new server with Pantheon. It used to be here on the physical server, but this is available. It has a public facing side, but it's not interactive. So that's another discussion over time is whether or not we want that to be more accessible for patrons. I think there has to be an intermediary there, but it's how we track who's using meeting rooms at any given time, and it's one of our most used web resources. Calls and questions about who can use what meeting room or conference room when, and we use it for other things too. We use it to book, like for example, some of the labs services are on there. You can book a time and things like that. Right now, that's mediated by our staff, but we use this software to do it. It was just a straight PHP file for a long time. I think it's more sophisticated now. This is another thing that our ILS vendor would be happy to sell us a solution for. But it works pretty well. We've been using this for like 15 years. It's a good piece of code. Trumba is the aforementioned calendaring software. And Sarah's got a bunch of information about the history of it, how it works, how we use it on staff. The way it works now is that, again, workflow comes into this, so with that solution, staff everywhere are developing programming all across the region, and they're sending it in, it's coming in centrally, and it's being inputted from Sarah's office, so. Part of that is because we only have certain access licenses to access the software itself, and part of it's just a consistency thing. You know, there have to be certain elements, and she's the best one to say, like, yes, you need to include date, time, those types of things have to be overseen. There is a WordPress blog which continually, or I should say, the last few years, JMRL's kind of made a push to have more direct. I want to say discovery, but now I'm afraid I'm going to say discovery of things that are happening at the library. And we use it to kind of showcase, you know, for example, the online renewals that happened at the beginning of July. We use the blog to get a lot of detailed information about, well, here's what this means, and then we'll point people there, either from our website or social media or newsletter or whatnot. But it's another thing that we maintain.
Just out of curiosity, how are the automatic renewals going?
So far, so good. As the technology committee discussed yesterday, and this is the week where we're gonna find out what the problems are.
These working groups.
Oh, I'm sorry, the fines and fees work group yesterday, so it's the,
Okay, yeah.
thank you.
But it's only just now been 3 weeks, is the,
So it was only for things checked out after July. They all renewed, so far everybody's happy. We're gonna wait and see the folks that thought something was gonna renew and it didn't, I'm sure we're gonna hear. That's good. The logistical part of it went off without H. Thanks again. Our staff intranets. This was a project that Sarah took on this past year. We built the whole thing in Google Sites, and it's a much better tool for what we have. JMRL is the host for Civilpedia. Right now, that effectively means we are paying some other vendor to host this site. It was owned by Civil Tomorrow. They gave it over to JMRL with the Montreal Historical Society because they no longer wanted to maintain it. It has effectively been JMRL has had very little to do with it. We're not actively monitoring it or promoting it even at this point. We did work with the ACHS, that's the Historical Society here, to do some programming for people to come in and work on it and edit, but that has not happened.
it might be interesting just to understand what type of use it's even getting.
We're on
Yeah.
the Civilpedia Slack, Sarah and I,
Yeah.
we get, you know, comments from people using it.
People are-
Users and-
There are some help.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's driven by.
And lately, we've been getting a lot of bot attacks on it too, so
Mhm.
that's something Sarah and I've been maintaining, like adding countries to block lists and adding IP addresses that we know we've had to block from others too, just because it's just been slowing things down.
So there's a discussion there over time about like how we want to treat that resource. Right now, we're the custodians of it. But do we want to kind of bring it onto our servers, and do we want, ideally, if we had staffing for it, we would have a librarian to manage it, the programmer, but that's not really, hasn't been.
Or if it's not getting used and it's not core to our mission values, you can go the other direction.
Well,
So,
we would, again, like talking about with other assets, like find some data.
Yeah.
Transition.
Ideally, yeah.
There were a couple of that I was thinking.
I mean, avenue.org, I mean, we didn't even put that on here since that one's been, I mean, Sarah and I supported when we can in the transitions of, you know, staff in and out of now Fred's position, so that is another thing that we.
It's another way of resource. Yes.
I don't- Sarah's typing out, if there's anything else we're missing. Mocio is their chat functionality.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, some of the web applications we have, so,
That would be one of them. That is something that gets used quite a bit if you go to our JMRL lab, or if there's a librarian, and that's a software that we use that goes directly. It's usually our reference down through the central library. It's just this question. So it's only available during operational hours. So those are, I think so, most of those we covered before. Those are the types of things that I would envision putting in, like, here's the last time these were reviewed, and then here's the cycle we want to use, like every this many years.
Yeah.
And then here's when they would each come up, and here's something about process. How that would work.
And then all of that really is oriented towards maintaining current functionality. And right there should be also, as part of this process, just a kind of right, a monitoring of the environment and what what new or emerging technologies should JMRL be at least looking at.
I agree, and I think that, well, specifically now we're talking about web-based
Right.
offerings that we would have.
Right.
And I think that flows from what Mike was saying about setting some high level, like, what are our goals for this? So that if things develop that would help meet those goals, I think about that chatbot.
Yep.
Right?
Right.
Like, what is the future of chatbots
Right.
on the web?
Or on the, in a library context also.
I mean,
Yeah.
both site search and chat are might be disrupted by AI.
Yeah. I mean, site search is a good one, that's not, we haven't thought about that as a separate functionality, but it is something that is.
And this site search does really well. It searches the catalog, it searches the calendar, it searches the content of the
Nice.
website as well.
That's one of the reasons that we went with this Drupal architecture, is the ability to search the catalog, like to search both the catalog and the website from one search bar.
Yeah.
Although I haven't looked at it recently, I guess, but it seems to me it gives you results from one domain or the other. Or it seems to me it often gives you results from both domains when you really only want it to be in one domain.
It
So
gives you, it separates them out.
Yeah.
You know, here are the ones from the catalog.
All right.
Which is good because users just don't differentiate it.
Yeah.
And like,
And my dream is always that if you went in and typed in yoga, you know, you would get, well, here are the books we have about yoga, here are the programs that we have on yoga, and here's some.
I think I'm thinking more of an example where I type in website and I want to get a book about websites because I'm a general user, and instead one of the things being surfaced to me is the minutes of the technology committee.
Yeah, you can.
And I'm not interested in that. Yeah, okay.
But if that's not intuitive. Martha, did you try to say something?
No, I did not.
I'm just hearing things, never mind.
Oh,
So-
it's just the background noise here.
but like, right, so I mean, presumably at some point, right, there could be sort of an AI kind of ability to sort of ask a question and have that kind of go across the catalog and the events and the website and the blog posts and right and so that right, that to me that's like a, you know, that's one obvious potential disruption that would change like how the website worked. And I don't know if there's any others.
That is kind of something that this like innovative, their Vega products are trying to do, like their Vega Discover catalog has some of that AI functionality that they've been rolling out with kind of back and forth, and then when you know, if you switch to their programming calendar, you can include the program events in the catalog, and that would show kind of that relative, like looking up yoga, seeing that, website, seeing your program on web design, as well as
Yeah, that was my thinking as well, is that if we ended up using one of these vendor provided solutions for some of these functionalities, then like some of that. I don't wanna give up the onus for that, you know, I give up the libraries say in those things, and some of it will come from, maybe driven by the market base.
Yeah.
They'll be adding those things.
Right.
Charging small for them, but still with the adding. Our experience of that particular company is nothing, it's less than $10,000.
Yeah.
It's good, it's a good product.
So I'm thinking of this part of the discussion as, well, you're saying disruption, which means it might become more and more common to have a different pattern over time, but I'm also just thinking of it as opportunities. So stuff that is not in the core list of things that we've traditionally been doing, but because of new technologies, here's some things we want to keep an eye on that are opportunities. There might be a section somewhere, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you have that in your head, if not written down somewhere already.
You know, in terms of the technology bell curve, JMRL has pretty firmly sat on the top of it, you know, over the years. Like, sometimes on the far end, sometimes on the front end. So some of that too is driven by trends in the, you know, yeah, we want to be innovators, making an idea, but some of it will be, we saw this other library.
Right.
You know, like Fred went to ALA a few weeks ago and Joe came back with an idea that solves. Oh, we can borrow that.
Adopt.
Adopt. Yeah, I'm thinking about that bell curve. I mean, we didn't add DVDs to the collection until about 5 years after they were, you know, popular at home and VHS tapes were gone. And that was a long time conversation between board and staff and the public about what are we trying to provide? You know, what do DVDs meet our mission and values, or are they something else? So yeah, something I think about, and I think that this group could also keep in mind on where we want to be on that curve.
And like, unlike UVA, we didn't end up with a large Betamax collection that no one ended up really
Hmm.
wanting.
Well, and then there's this
But that-
question with resources too. You know, they weren't able to afford that Betamax collection to begin with. You know, they could collect and all that.
But yeah, it's not always good to be an early adopter.
So we, you know, try and find that balance just like every other. So I'm envisioning the takeaway for the board. So the goal that was given to me, that we've been talking about today, which means that my staff, school to this program, is to come up with this roadmap, right? And what I'm envisioning is that we take the elements of this discussion today, when the technology committee gets back together next quarter, we present kind of a draft based on this conversation, you know, try to articulate some of the things and then identify some elements and try to put some dates by them. We work on that as a group a little bit. If there are elements that need to be happening now, you know, then we would kickstart that process internally and then present something to the board in early 26 saying, here's a document or process, or here's something that we're gonna follow. When we're talking about all those elements.
That's good.
So in the interest of completeness, I'll throw a possible approach on the table and just hear reactions. Obviously, you're the experts on all your existing components. And we've also thought about, from what I've called business goals, is there a role, because you're busy, and is there a role to get an outside consultant to do, as part of this process, some kind of an audit and just talk you through, hey, what are your goals with this? Here's how I, the consultant, would translate those into processes or terminology or concepts that I've used, that we use repeatedly in the website industry. I don't know. I acknowledge there's time and effort to manage that person aside from their cost, but could there be a benefit to getting a better result with less overall staff time by involving something like that?
Yeah, potentially. I've yet to see that.
Yeah.
We have looked over the years, we have worked with some outside groups. We've talked to local groups here, we've worked with some groups, with web development groups, you know. I think I would never say no to an opportunity that presented itself. Like if we found the right fit for, oh, here's what the library needs, and here's this outfit that can do it, and the money works and all those things, then sure.
And to be clear, what I'm talking about right now is the scope of just sort of what I would call we're not saying to hire. I do think we should consider hiring people for implementation when we have something to implement, but I'm talking about from a assessment standpoint. Okay, offline I have, if you're interested in just asking someone, hey, what would an assessment look like from your standpoint, and is this a service you offer, and how much does it cost? I have a couple of leads I could throw at you, and you could learn it from them if that's even exists. If anyone even offers this as a service, and if it's useful, I don't know. just trying to be broad at this point in terms of possible approaches, thinking about possible approaches.
Yeah, we were looking at the state library's new site, they just launched.
Yes, you might ask them, how did that happen? Yeah,
The state actually hosts sites, putting this conversation full circle. For library systems that fall below certain thresholds, they will host a site, so your library website would be JMRL dot something dot Virginia dot.
Yeah.
I think they're moving away from that as well.
I mean, that, right, like that, I think that looking at other library websites, is often one of the quickest, like, it's a sort of great shortcut to kind of figuring out, like, what would we want to do differently. You know, like when I was with Ann Arbor, I asked the staff to share what they thought were like some really outstanding websites, and then I through and ended up picking 2 or 3 that kind of were certain models for, you know, particular elements that, you know, one library was doing really well, library was doing really well, and so I think that you know, like Fred going to ALA is an example that, like, as staff are going to conferences, seeing like what, you know, cutting edge libraries are doing, right? No library is good at everything, but you're sort of see one library that's doing something really interesting here. And one of the things I would really like for the board is, like, you know, maybe it's once a year or something to sort of have a bit of a presentation of what is cutting edge in public libraries across the country or around the world, if you want. But just to have a little bit of a sense of in that experimental space, what are libraries doing, so that we're kind of from an educational perspective, so that board members are at least aware of some of the things that libraries are doing. And I feel like that potentially could be a really, you know, just bringing some of that stuff together could be kind of an energizing experience for staff, and just to kind of keep us all, like, not just trying to maintain what's there, right? But and it doesn't mean that anything needs to be acted on. Right? It's not like, well, this one public library did a really cool AI thing, we have to do that now, right? It doesn't.
yeah, it's just an opportunity.
But it's
that
just
we've
even just to
identified.
know that
Yeah.
What folks are doing. So anyway, from a board member's perspective, I would just love, like, once a year or something to have a bit of a sense of what is,
I also.
what's different this year than last year. And
I encourage more members, BLA, this kind of open to go and pursue those things as well, so. ALA and PLA are bigger commitments. Where's PLA?
Milwaukee.
Walking, there you go, so. It's a bigger commitment than
Yeah.
driving to Richmond, but yeah, I think certainly we can do that, you know, I was thinking about the previous director commissioned a 2020 committee to think about what should the future of JMRL look like. What year was it? 2019. And that group got together and did this exact sort of thing, like, what are the trends, what do we think we're gonna need in the future, and how should we, and they were able to make some changes like right away. I forget what they were, but I think one of the, maybe food in the library, it's probably not it, but something like that. It was like, oh, you know, they looked around and saw that, like, JMRL was doing something different and talked about it, brought it to the board said, sure, and that happened like immediately rather than planning for the future. So to your point about seeing value and expanding the horizons, always a good idea. Thanks.
Cool.
Maybe not next month.
No, I know. I know you've got a lot on your plate. Yeah.
Your new collections and technology
Too soon.
At exactly 4:30.
Yeah.
Are we?
Is there anything else to do
So-
over?
So we're working on this roadmap, and remind me again what you think a next milestone would be.
So I think that so we're committed to this group meeting quarterly, right?
Okay, just report progress.
Graph
Okay.
that we could like look at.
Great.
And I think that I like that framework of like, here are the objectives, the goals and objectives that at least staff thinks we're trying to accomplish with our website. And then flowing from that, like, here are the elements that
Are in
help to
place.
reach those
Yeah.
currently.
Yeah.
And if we have information about like deadlines on those, or maybe potential suggestions on.
Cycles. Yeah,
So
great.
that would be my hope, that it may not be that level of detail,
Yeah.
you know, because we are gonna be down a key member of the team that would be doing this work, but I think, yeah, we know where to find Kayla, I've got enough of the background that we can.
Okay, great.
put together.
Yeah, that would be great.
Something to begin talking.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Good, okay, we're adjourned.
Thanks, Martha.
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you, Kayla.
Thank you.
We'll see you on Monday.